When Clint was released from prison, he was 40 years old. Yes, life didn't go smoothly in his youth. Coming home late from work one evening, he defended a girl from 3 drunken guys who were bothering her. He defended her unsuccessfully. In the fight, one of the hooligans stumbled onto his own little knife and got himself killed. Clint got sentenced, said goodbye to his wife and 3-year-old daughter. While he was serving his time, his mother died, his wife remarried, and his daughter forgot him. So, when Clint was released, he didn't know what to do and how to live. No home, no job, no friends. After wandering the city for several days in vain search of work, Clint decided to go to the countryside where labor hands were always needed in the summer. He walked to the river lazily, carrying its waters to the sea, and walked along the bank where the summer heat was not so stifling. Finally, the city with its asphalt and concrete ended. Now, the river meandered through the lush vegetation of the forest. What beauty, Clint thought involuntarily, stopping in front of another bend in the river and admiring nature. It would be great to build a tiny house here and live as I please. You can catch fish. The man took a small backpack off his shoulders, undressed leisurely, and stepped into the water. He swam, making rhythmic strokes with his arms, and a sense of calm penetrated his soul. It was as if the river washed away all his grievances and bitterness over the course of his life. In the evening, clouds appeared slowly covering the sky and bringing dusk. But through a small gap in the clear sky, the sun still illuminated the river waters. The evening was quiet, and a whimsical picture of the sky reflected on the mirror surface, creating an illusion of an underwater kingdom. Clint stretched out on the grass, using his backpack as a pillow, and gazed at the sky for a long time. His soul reached out to the sun. He woke up to someone carefully trying to pull the backpack from under his head. Clint opened his eyes and sat up sharply. In the pre-dawn twilight, he saw a small furry creature biting into a rope. "Hey, give it back," the man shouted and yanked the backpack forcefully. The creature squealed and whined. It was a little puppy resembling a shepherd. "Where did you come from?" Clint said, looking around. The puppy whimpered even more pitifully. The man listened, but besides the chirping of waking birds and the splashing of river waves, there were no other sounds indicating the presence of people. "You got lost." "Well, what am I saying? There's no housing nearby. They must have thrown you away, huh?" The puppy buried its snout in the grass, looking at Clint with bewilderment. It really didn't want to think that it had been simply discarded like unwanted stuff. But no matter how you looked at it, that's exactly what happened, and the little dog sighed heavily. "I get it," Clint said sadly, "and you're probably hungry, huh?" The puppy whined even more desperately. Clint untied the backpack, took out bread and canned fish. "Here, eat," he said, placing an opening in front of the puppy, and took a bite of the bread himself. When the food was finished, Clint put the backpack on his shoulders. "I'm on my own, without a house or a job, just going with the flow. If you want, come with me, and if not, stay here and wait for better times." The man confidently walked along the river, and the puppy jumped up and, without hesitation, ran after him. The first village they reached was unfortunate. It was too close to the city, and the people lived too comfortably to hire any ragtag workers, let alone with a dog. "Don't be sad," Clint encouraged the pup, settling for the night by the river. "Let's move away from the city. There are poorer villages with kinder people. We'll be useful to someone." Clint kept talking and talking, glancing at the puppy. It was so heavy on his soul, the thought of whether it was worth living further relentlessly drilled into his head. It only seemed from the outside that the man was encouraging the naive little puppy. In reality, Clint was encouraging himself. Dick lay in the grass, attentively listening, tilting his head from side to side. He didn't understand anything from this continuous stream of words, but listened to the intonation with which the man spoke and rejoiced that he was not alone. Clint fell silent and sighed heavily. Dick immediately whined mournfully. "Well, why are you bringing this melancholy here?" Clint immediately pushed away from himself the heavy thoughts, cheerfully talking. "Look at what I bought today. Here, a pot, wheat groats, a can of stew, water, and this is a bowl for you. Do you like it? Dick ran up to the bowl and immediately stuck his nose into it. Empty. The puppy looked at Clint with bewilderment, barked offended, took a few steps back, and then lay down on the grass, turning his back to the man. Clint laughed. Hey, Dick, what are you upset about? I need to prepare the food first. Oh, you silly face. Come on, help me gather some branches for the fire. Clint started picking up dry twigs, and Dick, forgetting that he was upset, immediately rushed to help. The dry twigs crackled merrily in the flames, and the water in the pot began to boil. Clint was busy adding wheat groats to the pot. Meanwhile, Dick, sticking his nose into the backpack, diligently went through its contents. The puppy poked his snout out of the backpack, looked somewhat melancholy at his new owner, who stood with his back to him and stirred the porridge in the pot. After a brief thought, his head quickly dove back into the backpack. A second later, Dick, holding something in his teeth, quickly disappeared behind nearby bushes. Clint abandoned the stew, stirring it with a spoon. Well, it's ready now. Dick, where are you? Dick's rustling behind the bushes indicated that he was there, but for some reason, the puppy stubbornly remained silent. Clint cautiously circled the bushes, and the puppy had apparently forgotten about the stew, diligently burying something in the ground. Clint didn't want to disturb the busy puppy, so he smiled and quietly returned to the campfire. He looked at the scattered items from the backpack, smiled again, and thought, I wonder what you managed to swipe there. All the food is near the fire. What did you find? 5 minutes later, Dick emerged from behind the bushes, as if nothing had happened. His expression clearly said, so are we going to eat today or what? Come on, look at what a great porridge we've got with meat. Clint put the bowl in front of the puppy. You can even have a drink under this porridge, right, Dick? The puppy wagged his tail around the bowl. The porridge was hot. Clint reached into the backpack to get a spoon, but it wasn't there. Oh, you naughty little dog. So what did you bury there? Well, you little. As Clint saw it, unbelievable. And he thought he was just digging there. With these words, Clint went behind the bushes. However, before he could start digging, he heard a desperate, plaintive whine. Clint hurried back to find out what had happened. Dick sat there, forgetting about the bowl, whimpering and lifting his little muzzle. Hey, what's wrong? Burned by the porridge? Clint asked, realizing that it wasn't about the porridge. There was something else here, but what? He approached, sat down, and patted the puppy's head. What's the matter, Dick? The puppy looked at the man with despair in his eyes, trying to convey something very important. He barked, whimpered, lowered his head, poking his nose into the ground and covering his eyes with his paws. Then he would lift his head with a plea and a bit angrily look at his new owner. Clint was puzzled. He felt sorry for the little one who was trying so hard to say something. He, the new owner, just couldn't understand. Trying to calm Dick down, Clint stroked and reassured the puppy, promising that everything would be okay. Pushing the bowl with already cooled porridge and completely forgetting about the buried treasure, Dick calmed down a bit and began to eat, glancing anxiously at the man all the time. Eat, excellent porridge, Clint encouraged the puppy, demonstratively putting a spoonful of porridge in his own mouth. Oh, delicious. Eat faster, or it will get completely cold. When the meal was over, they lay down near the glowing embers of the dying fire, and soon Clint heard Dick snoring rhythmically, burying his wet nose in the man's neck. The sun was just about to emerge from the horizon, but the man and the dog were already awake, stretching from the morning chill. Clint decisively stripped off his clothes and plunged into the warm river water, which had not yet cooled since yesterday. He swam, thinking about the fact that there wasn't much money left and that it would be good to find some kind of temporary work. Dick ran along the shore, watching his owner attentively and barking cheerfully when Clint called to him from the water and waved his hand. Suddenly, the puppy saw that the man's head disappeared into the water. No matter how he looked or barked, the head didn't reappear. Frightened, Dick boldly leaped into the water and swam clumsily, paddling with his small paws in the direction where the owner had last waved to him. He was too small for swimming, and soon he began to sink. But despite this, Dick desperately continued to swim forward. Clint emerged from the water, shaking off drops and burping cheerfully. "See how I can, Dick," he shouted, turning toward the shore. "Dick, where are you?" Dick suddenly, in the morning silence, a sound resembling a sob rang out. The man immediately looked in that direction. 20 meters away, he noticed some commotion in the water. Little Dick, gasping for breath, was trying to paddle with his last strength. A strong hand caught the half-dead puppy just before his nose was supposed to disappear underwater forever. Clint pressed the wet pup to himself, repeating all the time, "Well, Dick, what's wrong? Did you think I drowned, silly? You ran to rescue me." And Dick happily yelped, licking the water droplets off his owner's face. Something painfully squeezed Clint's chest, and burying his face in the wet fur of the dog, he suddenly burst into tears. He cried because in this cruel and harsh world, there was a living being that needed him. Now knowing this, Clint suddenly believed that they would make it and life would definitely get better. After breakfast with yesterday's porridge, Clint packed his backpack. Dick was spinning and poking his nose around the campfire. At the last moment before setting off, Clint remembered the buried stash, the flask that Dick had hidden the night before. "I need to get it," thought Clint, and headed behind the bushes. The puppy ran alongside, jumping and wagging his tail cheerfully. "Oh, you little piglet!" Clint exclaimed in surprise, looking at the empty pit. "Hit it, huh?" he scolded the puppy. "What are you talking about?" The fluffy face looked at him with honest eyes, tilting its head to the side. "I'm talking about the flask you buried here yesterday." "Where is it?" "Answer immediately, little thief." "I have no idea what you're talking about." The furry face turned in another direction. Clint examined the honest puppy eyes for a moment and suddenly thought, how could this little puppy know about alcohol, and how did he manage to pick the flask from all the things in his backpack? Then Clint remembered Dick crying yesterday evening when he went behind the bushes intending to dig up the bottle. Perhaps his previous owners abused alcohol, and the little one suffered greatly from them. The thought flashed, so that's what you wanted to tell me. Clint squatted down, looking into the puppy's eyes. Dick looked at the man questioningly and timidly, wanting his new owner to understand and fulfill the request not to drink alcohol, even sticking out his tongue on his own. "You're right, buddy. So many troubles from that cursed stuff," Clint said bitterly and sighed heavily. "You eat it well, and you did a good job. Let's go." And they walked towards the morning sun, which generously gave warmth to all living things on earth. With each passing hour, the sun rose higher, dazzling their eyes, but the man and the dog kept going. Now they knew for sure that everything would work out for them. They say that a person is sent as many trials as he can endure. Maybe that's true. When, on the fourth day of their journey, Clint and Dick approached a store in another village, the wallet was completely empty. The store had just received a shipment of bread, so there were many people. "Well, Dick," Clint said to the puppy, "lie down here on the grass while I go inside and try our luck. We really need it." The puppy obediently lay down on the grass. "Wish me luck." Clint squatted down and patted the puppy's ear, then stood up and decisively entered the store. Dick lay there, looking hopefully at the door. He seemed to understand the sad situation they were in with his armor, and he wished the man luck with every fiber of his little soul. Everything was just like the last 3 days. Clint offered help in any task. Now, more than ever, he was willing to do anything. But people, after inquiring about his skills, thinking, sighing, making some calculations, shook their heads. "We could use your help, but not now." "Hey, you!" A well-dressed, groomed man touched Clint's shoulder. By all appearances, he was not local, rather a city person. "Let's go." They went outside. "I live in the city, came here to visit my old folks. So, as a worker, you're not interesting to me. But I see this puppy of yours looks purebred. I'm curious, where did you get him?" Not your business, Clint replied. What do you want? Don't get feisty. I see you're a tough guy, and this puppy, I bet, is stolen, and you're just barely scraping by. I'll buy this dog from you. Of course, not for the price it's worth, but it'll be enough for you to buy some booze. So, what do you say? Yeah, get lost, Clint disdainfully said. Dick, let's go. Upon hearing the owner's call, the little dog joyfully rushed towards Clint, who, following some inner impulse, scooped up the puppy, held him close, and quickly walked away. Idiot, echoed a voice behind him. You will ruin yourself and lose the dog. Baba Kelly, sitting on a bench near the store and observing the whole scene, beckoned one of the boys playing nearby, whispered something in his ear, and unhurriedly headed towards the house. Uncle, wait. The boy caught up with Clint and the dog. Baba Kelly asked me to tell you that there's work for you, but she doesn't have any money. She said it's for food. If you agree, well, Dick. Clint looked at his satisfied-looking little dog. We don't have much choice. If it's for food, then it's for food. Dick encouragingly licked his owner's nose. Clint smiled, and they followed the boy. Baba Kelly was very old, living alone for a long time after her husband's death. They had no children, fate had not granted them that. Her property, including the house itself, was literally falling apart. Ideally, everything here needed to be broken down and rebuilt. Clint just whistled and asked, where should we start? Strangely enough, Baba Kelly insisted on starting with the fence. Despite Clint's arguments that it would be better to begin with the house, the old woman decisively replied, I'm telling you, start with the fence. There are boards in the shed, they may not be perfect, but they'll do. Fix the fence properly, paint it. Tomorrow I'll go to the store, buy paint. Boss is the boss, Clint shrugged and began working on the fence. Work was in full swing. Clint worked diligently. Baba Kelly fed both him and Dick well, almost indulging them. Besides the regular meals, there were dumplings with berries or pies. Eat now, let's have a snack, the old lady would say, placing treats on the table. Dick really liked it here, the spacious yard overgrown with tall grass, a consistently full bowl of tasty food, and the old lady, who often affectionately patted him and told stories, smiling. However, the old, scruffy cat living in the house hated the dog, and Dick often suffered because of it. After a few days, the freshly repaired fence sparkled in the sun with its green paint. It stood out brightly on the street, attracting the attention of the villagers. Baba Kelly, very pleased, announced that today was a day off and left early in the morning for the store. She seemed unusually excited and slightly glanced at her worker from time to time. While the old lady was away, Clint, watching the puppy chewing on yesterday's bone, pondered what to do next. Being taken in and fed by Baba Kelly was great, they were lucky. But they needed to think about the future, they couldn't sit here forever. They needed money. Well, Dick, what are we going to do? Clint asked, with a hint of melancholy in his voice. The dog left the bone and happily ran to his owner, wagging his tail. What to do? Play, of course, gleamed the little face with joy. Clint laughed, ruffled Dick's head, and sprawled on the grass. Chase me. The puppy happily raced around the yard. And at that very moment, Baba Kelly sat on a bench near the store, pretending to relax. Meanwhile, she casually praised her worker to everyone around. Maybe you'll fix my fence too, Stacy, whose husband was constantly drinking, timidly asked. It's embarrassing in front of people, Baba Kelly. Give in for a couple of days, let him fix my fence. I'll pay well. Look at your fence, it's so beautiful. Maybe you will if you pay him properly, Baba Kelly replied, adding quickly, oh no, I'm busy myself. No time for him. You're too late, Stacy. When he asked for a job in the store, you should have taken the opportunity. Well, I thought he was some kind of scammer, might steal something. All right, Baba Kelly, please let him fix my fence. I'll pay well. Look how beautiful your fence is. Okay, how much is it? The old woman pursed her lips. Stacy named the amount. I don't have time to sit here and chat with you and have idle conversations, grumbled Baba Kelly, starting to rise from the bench. All right. Stacy grabbed her hand. I'll pay, and she stated another amount, almost twice the initial one. I don't know, Baba Kelly said, sitting back on the bench. You know how much work I have myself. Well, okay, I'll give you a couple of days. But if you deceive me later, Stacy, I'll disgrace you and the whole village. Oh, come on, Baba Kelly, I told you. All right, maybe I'll convince Clint. Wait for tomorrow morning, and if not, sorry. You should have thought about it earlier. By lunchtime, Baba Kelly returned to the yard, shining like a new penny. When Clint mentioned house repairs, the old woman waved her hands and said it was time to have lunch. And over tea, she solemnly announced that they needed to fix the fence, and Stacy would pay for it. I've already arranged it. Thank you, Clint rejoiced. And I'll fix the house for you, don't worry. I've worked out the details, and I'm not worried, interrupted Baba Kelly. Clint, you know at Stacy's place. I know, the shed is falling apart. She'll ask you to fix it later, for sure. Look, a separate fee for the shed. People are like that, they want everything for free. But you need money, don't look at their pitiful faces. If someone doesn't have money, they won't ask you for anything. And the old woman detailed the approximate prices for various jobs to Clint. In the evening, sitting in the yard with Dick, Clint told the dog that it seemed like luck had smiled at them a little. Meanwhile, Baba Kelly happily rubbed her hands in her room. Well, now things will go smoothly, thought the old woman. Stacy is the first gossip in the village, she'll spread the word, and people will start hiring my lodger. I feel sorry for him, he's a good man. Oh, destiny, everything happened just as Baba Kelly predicted. Seeing Clint's work, people were interested. After all, there was plenty of work in the village in the summer. Clint took on any job, and every time he came to Baba Kelly, he still lived in the house with Dick. He put the money he earned on the table and said, "Here, earn today, take as much as you need for the house." The old woman counted the money, asked in detail about the work, then chuckling with satisfaction, she took a few bills, saying, "This will be enough," and returned the rest of the amount to her lodger. Clint cheered up, became livelier, playing with Dick. In the evening, he often said, "It's okay, Dick, we'll save up some money by summer, and then maybe we'll find some other permanent job. The main thing is not to lose heart, right, Dick?" "Woof, woof," replied the little dog, which meant, right. It should be noted that since the puppy met Clint, he had no doubt that everything was going well and right in their lives. Now Dick had his own yard with thick, soft grass that was pleasant to roll on. There was always food and water, no one beat him, locked him in a dark little room, or thrust his nose into puddles. And he had a brand new collar and leash that the little dog was very proud of. No wonder now Dick was not just a dog but a dog with a master. Every day, he marched proudly to work with Clint and sat there where the man left him with the words, "Dick, sit," when someone unfamiliar was nearby. The puppy's nose involuntarily turned upward, his ears stood up like candles, his body froze, and only his little eyes wandered, making sure everyone appreciated his noble posture and importance. Every evening, Clint spent time with Dick, teaching him various commands and just playing. This puppy was as necessary to him as air. Looking into those small, loyal, loving eyes, Clint gradually thawed his soul, forgiving the world for the injustice that life had presented to him. But most importantly, this puppy gave him a sense of purpose and the value of his own life, instilling confidence in tomorrow. Similarly, Dick needed this big and strong man. Sometimes at night, the puppy still suffered nightmares from his past life. After such a night, Dick usually lay quietly aside, glancing at Clint with a timid, questioning look. He really wanted to hear that he was good, and Clint, seeing him in such a state, intuitively approached him, patted his head, and said, "You're a good dog. You're a very good dog. You're the best dog in the world, and you're my only friend." After these words, Dick immediately jumped up and passionately licked his owner's face, as if to say, "You can count on me because I will never betray you." And for some reason, Clint muttered softly in these moments, "I know, Dick. I know." September was coming to an end, and so were the jobs in the village. Clint had already accumulated a decent amount of money. However, finding a steady job proved elusive. All the positions in the villages were taken, and in the city where the man diligently went every week, they didn't want to hire him because of his criminal record. No one cared about the reason for his imprisonment. The main thing was that he had been in jail. Besides, there was no shortage of willing workers in the city. Dick grew up, transforming from a little puppy into a handsome teenage dog, very smart and quick-witted. Now he was no longer afraid of the scruffy cat that had bothered him at the beginning of summer. Yes, and the cat itself stopped attacking Dick. If these two didn't become friends, they were no longer enemies. If there are higher powers in the world guiding our destiny, they probably decided that Clint had passed the first test with dignity. Because in early October, a fellow villager named Derek came to Baba Kelly. Derek was over 70, lived at the other end of the village, and didn't have a close friendship with Kelly. "How come, Derek? You've come to me?" the old woman asked in surprise. "I wanted to talk about your lodger." "What can you say about him?" "And what should I say about him? He's had a rough life, but he's a hard-working, conscientious man." "Why do you ask?" "I started renting out my place. I don't have the strength anymore. I want to quit the job." Derek worked as a caretaker at a recreation center located on the river about 15 kilometers from the village. "I want to offer Clint my place. It's not exactly lucrative, but it's stable." Baba Kelly was initially very pleased, but then she became sad. "But will they take him there? You know him well. You know he's been in prison." "I'll take care of it, vouch for him. And besides, not many eager ones will be found to guard alone there in winter." When Derek and Clint approached the owner of the recreation center the next day, he hesitated for a long time about hiring the new guard. On the one hand, the guy was young and strong, unlike Derek, who had been a useless watchman for the last couple of years. But on the other hand, Derek was a proven reliable, and this one had a criminal record. Dick tipped the balance. Watching him, the owner of the recreation center thought, "This is not some stray dog, this is a serious dog." Yes, and a bad person wouldn't have such a dog. Look at how devotedly he looks at his owner. If I try to push him now, he'll tear me apart in an instant. And the deal was made. Baba Kelly was glowing with joy for her lodger, baked pies for the farewell. Clint, packing his modest belongings, was also happy. Just the thought that during all this time, in the end, he had not really fixed anything for the old woman except the fence, scratched at his soul. They sat at an old but sturdy oak table, drinking tea with pies. "Don't worry, Clint. Everything will gradually improve," Baba Kelly smiled. She paused, sneakily glancing at her lodger, and then said, "And you, it seems, are not happy." "Yes, I am happy, Baba Kelly. Very happy," he replied with a heavy sigh. "But I still didn't fix the house for you and the fence either. I only managed to do the fence." And the old woman interrupted and waved her hand, found something to be sad about. "Let me tell you, if I needed it, you would have done everything. But I don't need it. I'm already very old. I don't know if I'll live until spring. Why do I need those changes? And I didn't want you to touch the house. My husband and I built it together, every nail, every board. It's my memory of him and our youth. I didn't want someone to tear it all down. It's old, but it will last until my death. I want to die in it so that everything remains intact. I didn't need that new fence at all. I just ordered you to show people to help you, you see. And everything worked out for me, so don't be sad about it. It's not worth it." They fell silent. Baba Kelly, not far from here, just 15 kilometers away, said, "We'll come to visit you with Dick, if you don't mind, of course. Whenever you want. Come, I'll be glad. And if not, I won't be offended." Your business is young, maybe there won't be time. Thank you, Baba Kelly, for everything. Dick and I will definitely come. Clint threw the backpack over his shoulders, attached the leash to Dick's collar, and walked out with him through the gate. The most challenging first months of uncertainty and doubt had been lived, and now man and dog confidently walked towards their future, while Baba Kelly stood by the fence waving at them for a long time. 2 years passed. All the time, Clint and Dick lived at a riverside resort. The base was seasonal, 24 small wooden houses scattered in the forest and a sufficient distance from each other to create the illusion of solitude with nature. Basic amenities, wooden boats, and catamarans for rent. There were only 2 brick buildings here. One was a structure that combined the manager's room, a room with bedding and mattresses, and a warehouse where boats and other gear were stored. The second was a small house with a stove for the caretakers, where Clint lived. Usually, life here bubbled from mid-April to early October. The rest of the year was quiet and deserted. True, there were nature lovers who enjoyed spending time here even in snowy winter, but they were few, and the 5 electric heaters on the property were more than enough. The staff was minimal: a manager, 2 elder women who cleaned the houses and looked after the beds, an electrician, and a caretaker. In summer, Clint took care of the order on the base and rented out watercraft, and from autumn to spring, he remained alone at the base, responsible for the safety of all property. Well, and he hosted the occasional guests. In that first winter when Clint and Dick lived at the base, they were very happy. Clint was happy to no longer be an unclaimed autumn leaf driven through life by the relentless wind. And now he had, if not a prestigious, his own niche in human society. Baba Kelly was right when she said that everything would gradually work out. Moreover, his first wish on freedom had come true. Now he lived on the bank of this beautiful river in a small house. He caught fish, contemplated life, and, most importantly, he was left to his own devices. Merging into human society with its rules and problems was something Clint was not ready for yet. And Dick was happy because his owner was happy. Dogs sensed their owner's inner world and moved very keenly. Moreover, there was no need to sit for hours, waiting and behaving decently when his owner worked on someone else's farm. Here was freedom. How pleasant it was to race through the grass and dig into fallen leaves from which emanated a particularly pleasant scent. And to rush along the riverbank with the wind whistling in his ears. And although it had become noticeably colder outside, it didn't stop Dick from frolicking. On the contrary, the fresh frosty air added even more excitement to the dog. One night, when the wind was so strong that it seemed to want to knock down their cozy warm house with the cheerfully crackling fire in the stove, Dick caught, with his sensitive nose, a scent previously unknown to him seeping through the cracks in the window and door. Because of this new scent, Dick didn't sleep practically all night. His heart raced blood through his body in anticipation of something completely new and unknown. The dog whimpered quietly in his corner by the stove, unable to contain the unfamiliar emotions that tore from his chest. By morning, the wind had subsided, and his owner finally opened the door. Dick, who just a moment ago was ready to rush out, froze in the doorway, eyes wide open with amazement. The world had completely changed overnight, and it wasn't just that everything around, including the trees and bushes, was white. Now all familiar scents had disappeared. Now the world smelled of the air that seeped through the cracks at night, not letting Dick rest well. "Dick, let's go look at how much snow has fallen overnight." "Beautiful." And with these words, his owner ran outside, echoing the silent space with loud cries of delight. Dick cautiously buried his nose in the snow. In a dog's life, the sense of smell is of paramount importance, surpassing human scent capability by 48 times. A dog's nose can distinguish up to 2 million scents and successfully compare them with the catalog already stored in memory. But strangely enough, the snow itself had no scent. The dog raised his head in bewilderment. Sniffing the unknown scent, which we call the scent of snow, filled his consciousness again. However, the repeated attempt to bury his nose in the snow yielded the same result. The snow itself had no scent. It's unclear how long Dick stood at the doorstep, sticking his nose in the snow, as Clint, laughing, pulled the dog outside and tackled him. They wrestled and rolled in the snow, laughing loudly and barking with overflowing emotions. And if someone could see them from the outside at that moment, they would undoubtedly think that this is what happiness looks like. Clint pulled on tree branches, showering the dog with snow through snowballs, and Dick went crazy with joy. That day, he even ate with tremendous speed, fearing that the snow might disappear while he leisurely chewed. Only towards the evening, after circling the entire area several times, digging a few holes in the snow, Dick, exhausted, went into the house, eagerly emptied his bowl of porridge, and immediately fell asleep. In that snowy winter, Clint bought skis, and along with Dick, went to the village once a week to visit Baba Kelly and buy groceries. The dog loved these outings. He raced through the untouched, clean snow like the wind, fast, strong, and free. Since the beginning of spring, Clint eagerly awaited the opening of the season, morally prepared to meet people. He now, more than ever before, craved social interaction, setting various plans in his mind, starting from simple ones and ending with incredible and grandiose ones. Sobriety and disappointment came very quickly. That first summer, in general, was an eventful one. Early morning, when Clint opened one of the houses for Emily to change the bedding and clean up after the latest guests who had left late the night before, a small white dog burst out of there with a squeal. Whining, the little dog desperately ran around the vast base in search of its owners. How could they forget the dog? Clint exclaimed in surprise. The man giving me the keys even said, "Well, it seems like they didn't forget anything." He smiled and waved from the car. I look at you, Clint, and I wonder, you're not 15 or 20 years old, and you're not a fool. Emily shook her head. Forgot? How could they? They intentionally left this little dog. Why would they leave her? Clint looked at the woman in confusion. Well, because they got tired of her, decided to get rid of her. They seemed kind-hearted, just locked her up and left. Sometimes by the river and in the forest, you see things that make it hard to sleep at night. The little white dog continued to run around the area, approaching each house and sniffing the air. By the end of the day, she was completely exhausted and fell on the grass near the house where she had lived with her owners for a week. But now, for some reason, there were completely different people there. Hey man, is your dog lying there near our house? Take her away. A guy from the newcomers approached Clint. Clint silently followed the guy. The dog lay on the grass, panting heavily, her mouth open. When Clint approached, she raised her snout with pressed ears and looked at the man. The dog's eyes were filled with pain and despair, and the fur under them was all wet. The man squatted down, patted the poor animal on the head, then picked her up and carried her to his house. The dog didn't resist, she simply didn't have the strength for it. For several days, the man and the dog hoped together that it was some terrible misunderstanding and her owners would surely come back for her. Then only the dog hoped. Bella, as Clint named her, with burning eyes full of hope, ran to every new car entering the territory. After a while, she returned, lowering her head and dragging her tail. Despite Dick's attempts to befriend her, Bella didn't react. She had no time for that, she was waiting. Towards the end of the summer, Clint saw what Emily meant. In the forest, by the river, you see things that make it hard to sleep at night. One early dawn, Clint went along the riverbank beyond the base to catch fish while all the vacationers were still asleep. He really wanted fish. After walking about a mile and a half, he comfortably settled and cast his fishing rod. Dick, as usual, ran further along the shore. The dog didn't like fishing, it was too boring. And 10 minutes later, distressed and urgent barking echoed. The man hurriedly responded to his friend's call. Dick, standing in the water, tried to pull out an iron cage containing a barely alive dog. Released from the cage, the dog didn't whimper, it just stood there, trembling, his unblinking gaze concentrated on the pain of the entire world. A few hours later, the city veterinarian would say that the dog was generally healthy, just old, around 12 or 13 years old. That night, Clint and Dick didn't sleep. They sat by the river, silently gazing at the full moon illuminating the surroundings with its lifeless light. Both of them felt heavy and miserable. Clint, for some reason, felt very ashamed in front of Dick, ashamed for the entire human race. Clint named the unfortunate little dog Marlowe. At first, Marlowe refused to eat. He constantly lay in one place, resting his head on his front paws. His wide-open eyes expressed nothing. Sometimes, it seemed they were lifeless. What happened to him didn't fit into the small dog's head, and he didn't know how to live on from now. His body constantly trembled, although Clint always placed Marlowe in the sun. Whether it was really cold for him or the dog's soul inside was frozen, no one would ever know. Only when, after a few days, Emily, who couldn't bear to look at the unhappy dog anymore, cut a kind of vest from her old woolen sweater and put it on the little dog, Marlowe's trembling immediately stopped. He slowly rose on his weakened legs and, for the first time since his rescue, looked at the world around him with a thoughtful gaze. Clint immediately placed a bowl of food in front of Marlowe. The little dog stared at the bowl for a long time, then slowly started eating. "I believe," Emily whispered, wiping away tears and nudging Clint. He believed in people again. Later on, Marlowe became very close friends with Bella, who, during all this time, categorically rejected Dick's attempts. But somehow immediately felt sympathy for the old man in the vest. Maybe she sensed the same pain in Marlowe's soul that lived in hers and that brought them closer. Now they were together everywhere. And of course, Marlowe couldn't run as fast as his snow-white friend anymore. But when Bella saw that he was falling behind, she always stopped and waited, waving her fluffy tail invitingly. By the beginning of autumn, these two moved into a spacious new kennel, more like a small house, with a large awning at the entrance, which Clint carefully built for them. Yes, that last summer made adjustments to Clint's rainbow plans, or rather, it crossed out all the thoughts and dreams that had arisen in the man during the long winter. Watching the behavior of vacationers, Clint suddenly didn't feel like blending into society. He remembered the testimony of the rescued girl in court, or rather, its absence because the victim claimed she was in shock and didn't remember anything. He remembered his wife's letter, in which she reported meeting the good man, and then her arrival, pleased to abandon their daughter if she valued her own future. He didn't blame his wife. He understood that it didn't make it any easier. But Bella and Marlowe, who became daily confirmation of meanness and cruelty, put a firm end to his decision. However, Grandma Kelly did not approve of Clint's decision. "You're still young, with a lot of life ahead of you. It's not fitting to shut yourself off from people. People are different, and good ones, after all, are more than bad ones. Many are just afraid to show their kindness," the old woman said. "And what is there to be afraid of showing it?" Clint protested. "You showed it, and what came of it? You're silent, that's why they're afraid. There's a price to pay, not only for bad things, but also for good ones, and for indifference, there's its own price. Each person chooses in life what to pay for. And listen to what I'll tell you, many think they'll have to pay on the other side, and that's why they do mischief. Like whether there is an afterlife or not, no one knows for sure. But they're wrong, everyone pays for everything in this life. You tell me, if you hadn't intervened, then walked past, how would you have lived? Maybe I would have lived well, with my wife and daughter. Yeah, with your wife, with your daughter, maybe. And maybe not. Are you sure she wouldn't have met that new man even without you? You're silent. But I'll tell you, you would have lived in fear that if something happened, no one would stand up for your wife and daughter because you walked by. How would you have felt? Good? Clint remained silent for a long time, lowering his head, and then he said, "Yes, Baba Kelly, you're right. I wouldn't have peace of mind, never. It's understandable that you're upset with people right now. Know that your time hasn't come yet. Every event has its time, and yours will come." This spring, the old lady passed away. Clint and Dick visited her on March 8th, just like they did a year ago. That time, Clint brought her favorite mimosa flowers, and Dick held a red rose in his teeth. How Grandma Kelly rejoiced, glowing with joy. "I thought whether you'd come or not," the old lady chattered, "but just in case, I prepared so that it wouldn't turn out like last time. You came with flowers, and I had nothing but yesterday's soup. I didn't think anyone would come to congratulate an old woman like me." They sat. Well, that time, the old lady prepared treats as if for a wedding. They talked about everything, laughed. Clint remembered how Grandma Kelly, stroking her shabby cat who had settled on her lap and purred loudly, suddenly became serious and said, "I have a very important request for you, Clint. When I die, if my cat is still alive by that time, don't abandon him. Take him with you. He's as old as I am and won't bother you for long. And it would give me peace of mind knowing that my cat will spend his last days in warmth." By evening, a strong rain with snow began, and Clint and Dick stayed at Grandma Kelly's overnight. He was awakened by Dick's prolonged, mournful howling. "What's wrong, Dick?" "Quiet, you'll wake everyone up," Clint whispered in the dark. But Dick continued to howl so that it tore at the soul. Grandma Kelly lay on her bed, eyes closed, a light smile on her face. With her right hand, she embraced the cat, which nestled against her shoulder with its shabby face. Their bodies were still warm. Following some impulse, Clint carried the cat's body to another room, placed it on a chair, and covered it with clothes. And when, during the day, the villagers prepared Grandma Kelly for her last journey, seizing the moment, he suddenly placed her beloved cat at her feet, carefully adjusting the cloth covering the body. Although it wasn't customary to put an animal in the coffin with a person, Clint felt that in this case, it was the right thing to do. That night, Grandma Kelly appeared in Clint's dream, standing and smiling, looking at her cherished cat, which sat on her lap and rubbed its head against her shoulder. Their silhouettes slowly moved away until they turned into a small black dot and disappeared altogether. In late May, when Clint was placing a cross and a fence on Grandma Kelly's grave, he learned from the villagers that the old lady had made a will. According to it, her yard, house, and 30 acres of land passed to him, as there were no other relatives left for Grandma Kelly. This summer swiftly entered Clint's life, overturning his soul and forcing the man to see the world with different eyes. Rebecca and her 5-year-old son, Jimmy, moved into one of the cabins in early July. Of all the new surroundings, the dog Dick impressed the boy the most. Jimmy literally attached himself to the dog from the first hours on the base, and Dick didn't mind acquiring a new friend. That's how Rebecca and Clint met and initially spent a lot of time together, albeit reluctantly and then willingly. Rebecca was 35, she had never been married, and at 30, she gave birth to a child for herself. In winter, Jimmy fell seriously ill with pneumonia, which developed into asthma. The doctors recommended that Rebecca take the boy out of town into nature more often. When the Page stay at the base was coming to an end, Clint suggested they live in a small cabin. And at the end of summer, right before leaving, Clint made a timid proposal to Rebecca. She replied that she needed to think it over and asked him not to call. She would call when she came to some final decision. September passed, and Rebecca didn't call. The last week of October arrived. Clint was almost sure that Rebecca would never call again, and rightly so. He whispered quietly, sitting on the riverbank and hugging Dick around the neck, "Why would she want an ex-convict? It doesn't matter to you, shaggy face, whether I was in jail or not." But neither Dick nor nature shared Clint's melancholy. The sun brightly shone in the sky, giving the colorful leaves even more beauty. The river quietly and unhurriedly carried its waters to the sea, and Dick blissfully squinted in the sun, stretching his muzzle into a semblance of a smile. Suddenly, the dog's ears perked up. Dick listened attentively for a few more seconds and then jumped up joyfully, barking, and ran along the path leading to the closed gates of the base. Clint reluctantly followed. Who could it bring now? The summer season has long ended. Behind the bar fence stood Rebecca with her son. "We came to relax while school was on vacation," Rebecca said. "And to talk, by the way. I'm sorry I didn't call. I had my phone stolen in the minibus on the very first day, and I didn't memorize your number." 3 more years passed. On freshly sparkling snow in the sunshine, Clint skied. Jimmy skied next to him, trying not to lag behind. And behind them, Rebecca followed with Dick, who pulled a small girl in sleds, dressed in a fur coat and wrapped in a blanket. The girl laughed and shouted cheerfully, "Go, Dick, go." And Dick resolutely went ahead, overtaking the man and the boy. Thank you for joining us today on Deep Stories. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video.